Okay, today we're going to talk about colors and some effects, opacity, and some real basic things, but we're going to talk about them in the context of creating custom buttons for your website and using effects in order to make them look like they're pushed down or released, matching colors with pictures on your website and things of that nature. All right, let's get started. First thing we want to do is we want to create a artboard or canvas or whatever that is a good size. Now on your website, I'm going to make mine a little bit bigger than you might want, 400 by 200 pixels. But you know, every time you create a button, you're going to create it a different size, and you're going to want to create it to the size of your needs for your website. Always keeping in mind that you want it responsive, so you want it a little bit bigger or the biggest size that you're going to need, so that it can shrink up and shrink down as needed. A couple things, 32-bit is just for me. You can leave it at 8-bit, really. 72 is the current popular resolution, although some people are using 90 now for web design. 300 is print, remember. It's probably going to start off with a white background when you create something new, and it's always a good idea for web design to change the background to transparent instead of a background color, so it just matches whatever background color you already have on your website. Like I said, I've got 400 by 200, and there we go. All right, so we have our artboard here. Zoom in a little bit so we can do some work on it. All right, so just to get started, a real basic button idea would be to use the rounded rectangle, and when you do that, the thickness of the line, whether you want it dotted or not, what color you want to fill, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. You can go ahead and set the width and the height if you know what you want that to be, or you can draw it out like that, or you can come in here. I know the canvas is 400 by 200, so I'm going to make my button 300 by 150. Okay, and it goes ahead and creates that for me. The radius is the rounding of these edges, and you can change that if you don't like it. Make the rounding a little bit bigger. Well, I didn't do what I wanted it to do. That's all right. We can center it. Now, sometimes you do want to put it up to the top left if you're going to have drop shadow. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right. Again, it's all to your liking, or the web design is to this radius and what you want to do with that, and how curved you want this button to be. So let's talk a little bit, real briefly about opacity. Let's give this just a black background. We'll move the button back in front of that. Now, opacity is how well you can see through an object. So right here's your opacity adjuster, and you can use these arrows to adjust it back and forth like so. You can also click on it and type in opacity. But as we bring the opacity down, you can see that it becomes see-through. Okay, you can see, and you might be able to see this a little bit better with it transparent in the background. But whatever you have in the background, this object becomes a little bit more see-through. That's the idea of opacity. Okay. Okay, so the next thing we're going to want to talk about is just matching colors, and the idea that you can match colors, and this foreground and background color, what that is, what that means. So you can switch your foreground and background as you're doing your design, but one of the things you might want to be interested in doing is going to a picture that's on your website and matching some of the colors on that picture. For instance, right here, I was playing around with matching either leaves or for a darker color, or and when it comes to brightness, you want one to be darker and one to be lighter, honestly. So you just kind of click around. You want to take something directly out of your image when you do this kind of thing. So, you know, there's a color, and now we'll go for a darker green. There we go. And if I wanted now to do that, I click up in here and fill, and it's got these recently used colors up here. Okay. So now I've got that a darker green. If for some reason I wanted to give it the background with my dropper, I can do that sort of thing, and now it'll match. I've got a background so I can see what it'll look like if that is the color of the main page on my website. So that works pretty well. So one of the other things is very common to do is drop shadow on your buttons. Okay, and like I said, let's just go ahead and add text. We can turn it off and on. I'm going to add text. Oh. There we go. Control A to select it all. We'll bring the font size down a little bit for now so it'll fit. Doing this really quick so you can see how this works. But you're going to want to make adjustments to make you happy. All right. But that's going to work for now. And like I said, well, as we go through this, we can turn it off and on. But one of the, let's start getting into effects. So I click on the rounded rectangle, and I do a drop shadow. A lot of ways to get to it. There's right click on it and stuff, but I've gotten in the habit of clicking down here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit drop shadow. And what you're going to want to do is learn how to change it. I like the angled. So that changes the distance away. You spread. You got to be really careful in web design. One thing you want to be really careful about is for that to go over the overlap of whatever your image is, or the canvas or artboard, because then it'll seem cut off on your website. So you want to be really careful about that. And one of the things we can do to fix that is if we have a drop shadow down to the left, you just move it up a little bit. And again, you can adjust it to your liking. Just see, and we can do some exaggeration so you can see what it really. And size, I think, is what you got to be the most careful with. There's a little bit of trial and error here to get exactly what you want. This is how you give that button the effect that it's separated or coming up off the page. So that's how you use drop shadow. All right. All right. So going down the list here of effects, let's play with Bevel and Emboss a little bit, and there's a couple ways to do that. So we can click on the actual button and go to Bevel and Emboss. See what that does. So you got first is inner bevel and outer bevel, and you can kind of see what that does. So we're going to go inner bevel, and then we'll change it to outer bevel. Zoom out to regular size. One thing you can do is you can go into the text with the emboss. Okay, so we'll start with and smooth. Don't like that for this particular text, so we'll just leave it here, and you can change the depth and things of that nature to make it not as far. So, okay, so here we go. We go up, smooth, 50%. I like that. This looks a whole lot better. So we'll go direction and we'll emboss it up on the text, and then we will emboss it down here. And all right. So you can see buttons up, buttons down, buttons up, buttons down. So doing that on the text gives you a cool effect if that's what you want to do. And like I said, you can also do that on the rounded rectangle. So we'll go emboss down, okay, and then we'll change it to up, okay. All right. So that's how you can use emboss to give you that effect, or bevel to give you the effect of the button being pushed up and down. Moving right along. Go through these effects. All right, so inner shadow and outer or drop shadow. So inner shadow will give you that. I mean that actually, without changing anything, that looks pretty good right there with these colors. So we'll hit OK, and you can see the difference between. And this is a good way to highlight. So when somebody moves their cursor over. Try this again. We'll go inner shadow and hit OK. And this is a good way for people when you highlight on a website. That's another effect that you can create on a website is when the cursor's over it. You can use inner shadow to create that effect of highlighting a button. And with these colors, that worked out really well. But the last one I like is outer glow for the same effect. So you have your normal picture and honestly, okay. And then we will give that rounded rectangle the outer glow like that. And what you can actually do if you want, because there's a level of opacity here, you can change this to that to match the color. And now what we want to do, again, we want for this effect, I'd probably change the canvas or the artboard and make it a little bit larger so that we're not cutting off our effect. But what you can see is another highlight, another way to highlight a button, or even make it pushable. So when somebody pushes the button, it can create a glow around it, especially if you have a really dark or black background. Using that outer glow style in order to give the user an indication that he's hovered over a button or she has clicked a button or something like that is, I think, really cool effect. And these are all real simple things you can do. It just takes a little bit of time to do them. All right. All right, so there's a little bit of information on how to create, use Photoshop to create buttons for your website and use effects within Photoshop in order to give users an indicator that they've highlighted or clicked on a certain button on your website. Also, an overview of a lot of the basics in color and how to use color in order to match color, change from foreground to background and back and forth again. Use the eyedropper in order to pick colors in other pictures and things of that nature. So thanks for your time.